And welcome back to another episode. In this video, I want to go over something that I've come to call the environment filter. And what the environment filter does is, at least for me, I think it helps explain why so many environmentalists are actually quite irrational in the way they pursue their goals. I came up with this idea of the environment filter, again, from the works of Scott Adams, and in his way of looking at the world, we all have filters of various kinds, whether we're aware of them or not. And the filters we use are basically mental constructs that allow our brains to attempt to comprehend reality, which ultimately is unknowable. And I did an earlier video specifically on the concept of filters, which I recommend you check out. But the main thing to know is that filters explain how we process the world and then how we interpret it. Now, most people, and I suspect most environmentalists, would believe that we live in a two-dimensional world. And in a two-dimensional world, what this means from a persuasion perspective is that people are rational 90% of the time, and occasionally we get a little bit crazy. So when talking about the environment, typically the environmentalists are very much facts, as they see them until it doesn't. But the view that Scott Adams has and the view that I now have is that we live in a three-dimensional world, and the primary filter that Scott uses is what he calls the persuasion filter. And the essence of the persuasion filter is that we are all moist robots that can be easily be reprogrammed at any time. We are easily influenced and are irrational 90% of the time. Mass delusions are common. So when it comes to environmentalists, I believe they use what I would call the environment filter. And the aspects of this filter are essentially that everything that is natural is good, and everything that man makes or does is bad. There's a strong belief with the environment filter that man is harming Mother Earth, and that we want to try and find ways to impact on Gaia. So this typically means, or always means, that environmentalists want people to use less, and they're extremely suspicious about capitalism and economic growth. Although they don't often say it, but it's often implied that they really don't want Africa or Asia to continue to get more advanced and more Western. You know, I've seen videos where Bill Nye is praising the carbon impact of people in Somalia because it's so low, because essentially they have nothing and they're starving, but they have a low carbon impact, so that's a good thing. Yeah, so they're very interested in zero impact on the earth. Man is always bad. And this is also why with environmentalism, it frequently comes across as being religious in nature, because in fact it actually is. And this is also why so many environmentalists are so big, I believe, on these sort of big climate change agreements, because to them it's almost like they're holy books. Whether they actually have any effect on the world, just like the Kyoto protocols had no effect, actually doesn't matter. But you still have to show your belief and sign it, even though perhaps you're not going to do anything. So what I want to go now is look at some environmental issues, and then look at them and say, do environmentalists respond in a rational way to this, or in an irrational way with the environment filter? Now, my biggest one, or one of my main ones here, is the whole idea of recycling. And I actually made a video about this earlier, which I'll link to below. But if you look at the idea of how recycling works in practice, it actually is quite irrational. So essentially, if it costs more resources to recycle than to make a new one, recycling is irrational. So let's pretend you had like a cardboard box, okay? And it takes one tree to make that cardboard box. However, if you want to recycle that cardboard box, it actually takes 3 trees to do that. Well, in that case, obviously recycling doesn't make any sense. It makes more sense to bury the to bury the box and to make a new one, and that actually has less impact. And this is also why, for example, with recycling, about the only product that makes sense to recycle is aluminum cans. And that's why anywhere where you go in the world, there's always people picking up aluminum cans, because it actually costs less to recycle that than to mine bauxite. So there's a real market for that, and that's what capitalism and the free market is telling you. But when you're trying to recycle everything else, from plastic to paper, etc., the fact that there is no market demand indicates that you're going to have to use more resources to try and recycle it. And a lot of times you don't even bother recycling it. It just winds up in landfills. But still, it makes you feel good that, oh, it's not being buried. Yeah, so this is why irrationally most environmentalists promote recycling, because for their filter, they just hate the idea of burying garbage, because it kind of violates their zero impact ethos. But you look into it, and you can watch the video I did on this. Recycling doesn't make any sense. But here, I think we can score one for the environment filter. Another one is this constant belief in wind and solar energy. Now, the problem with both wind and solar energy, and it has never changed, is that they are exceptionally poor energy sources, due primarily to what you might call the diluteness problem and the intermittency problem. Diluteness is that both the sun and the wind, that power is not concentrated, so it takes vast amounts of space to try and even collect energy. And of course, the intermittency problem is that the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. So when you try and set up a power grid based on these sources, you have to have a backup of some kind to cover for when it's dark or when the wind's not blowing. And that typically is very dirty coal plants, because only coal plants can be ramped up quite quickly to make up for the dips in power from wind and solar. And again, I did another whole video on this to kind of go into some more detail. But if you were rational, or environmentalists were rational, they would be looking at things like combined cycle power plants, which uses natural gas. And the way a combined cycle power plant works is that, so natural gas powers the plant, but then it generates a lot of heat, and then that heat is then used to heat more water to create more energy. So they actually are extremely efficient, and very much like a low carbon option. But due to the fact that, again, environmentalists are using this irrational environment filter, they prefer the idea that they love the idea that wind and solar, it looks like it's zero impact, because wind is free, the sun is free, and which is why it continues to be a powerful symbol. Anytime you see environmentalists talking about energy, you'll see typically the wind farm or solar panels. But again, in reality, for example, in the United Kingdom, like, they should be building combined cycle power plants, but they're not. Instead they're building wind farms, and with a whole bunch more coal. And it's the same thing in Germany. It doesn't make sense if you're looking at it rationally, but once you understand that environmentalists are using this environment filter, then it kind of does. And the biggest one, and it's kind of related to the previous point, is global warming. Now, if you're rational, again, or if environmentalists are being rational, and you really do believe that this is a real thing and you want to reduce carbon, you should be pro-natural gas, and you should be really pro-nuclear power. Because once again, renewables right now are like, make up less than 2%, I think, of worldwide energy production, and it's not going to go up by that much anytime soon. So you should be pro-natural gas and nuclear power. But of course, they don't, because they're using the environment filter. And the reason why they hate it so much is that, in their minds, it doesn't reduce the man's impact on the environment, particularly in the case of natural gas, because you still have to to get it from the earth, which typically involves fracking. And with nuclear power, you will have nuclear waste. Now, there's various things you can do with that nuclear waste, and there are ways that we can improve power plants to potentially recycle that. But that doesn't really fit in with the environment filter. And the other issue, of course, is that, again, what most environmentalists want is people to use less. And so they're very skeptical of economic growth, more prosperity, everybody having cars, or that kind of thing. And if you promote nuclear power or natural gas, which actually works, it's not going to force people to use less. They actually like it when the price of power goes up. So we have to be very careful with how much we heat our homes or the cars we drive or that kind of thing. So that's really basically it. I'm kind of curious what you think. First of all, do you even agree with my concept of the environment filter? And can you think of any other aspects of the environment filter that perhaps I've missed? I've already mentioned how it's kind of quasi-religious in nature, but maybe would you add anything to it? I'm kind of curious. And can you think of other examples of environmentalists using this filter to perform actions that are actually irrational when it comes to the environment? Another one that just occurred to me right now is actually the promotion of cycling or bike lanes. I'll post a link to an article below, but essentially the problem with bike lanes is that it clogs up the traffic, and then so you got a lot more cars idling, and that creates more pollution. But that's just one I just thought of right now. So other than that, if you're interested in what I'm doing here, please like and subscribe. And that's it for now. So until next time.